Thanks, Matthias. I'm Liberty League analyst Alyssa Spady. Games this weekend were pivotal to one team claiming the Liberty League title. Let's take a look at what happens. Thanks, Matthias. I'm Liberty League analyst Alyssa Spady. We are just 1 week away from Liberty League play. Let's check in with our teams in their out-of-conference matchups this past week. Thanks, Matthias. I'm Liberty League analyst Alyssa Spady. This weekend marked the first weekend of Liberty League play. Let's take a look at how our teams did. League analyst Alyssa Spady. We are approaching the final week of Liberty League play, but before we look ahead, let's recap what happened last week. Starting off with the first game of the day, the Ithaca Bombers traveled to RPI to see if they could bounce back from a tough loss against Union last week. This game also held extra importance as an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament was still up for grabs heading into the game. RPI was efficient on the offensive end. They marched down the field in their first drive. They capped off that 8-play drive in under 5 minutes with a 26-yard touchdown, giving them the early 7-0 lead. Across the board, it was Liberty League teams' defenses that were firing all cylinders, which will make conference play next week that more interesting. With that win, Union secures the Liberty League title this year and an automatic NCAA bid. It is the first time since 2006 that the Dutchmen will be dancing in the NCAA tournament. Ithaca is handed its first loss of the season, while Union remains undefeated. And they took their home field advantage to heart as they picked up 24 points in just the second quarter alone. The Engineers held Rochester just 210 yards on offense, and junior quarterback George Marianopoulos had 4 touchdowns. The final game of the night fell between Hobart and Buffalo State. Coming off a huge win against St. Lawrence, Hobart came in on a mission. Running back Ryan Hafner provided much of the firepower on the ground. He notched his second straight 100-yard game. Hobart's defense has been steamrolling teams, and it seems like that's not going to stop anytime soon. They limited RPI to just 110 yards, 46 on the run game, and 64 in the air. And while quarterback George Marianopoulos had a game that earned him our Liberty League Offensive Player of the Week last week, it was a different story yesterday. Marianopoulos threw 2 interceptions and fumbled the ball. It was their inability to convert on third downs that contributed to their rough day. They were only able to convert 2 of the 10 third downs. With a timely bye next week, Buff State will look to regroup and refocus to try and turn around this season. On the offensive side, senior running back from Hobart, Brian Hafner, led Hobart on the ground game. Last season, he was all Liberty League's second team, but with his rushing yards this season, he's a strong candidate for first team all-conference. Offensive side, the junior quarterback whose hometown, Slingerland, New York, perfectly describes his game against Rochester, George Marianopoulos. He was 67% on the day with 242 yards and 4 touchdowns. And my key game for Liberty League matchups next week, battle of the undefeateds, number 21 Hobart and Union. The 2 explosive teams have been dismantling their opponents, beating them by 10 or more each game. It was an unusually close game between last year's Liberty League champions and one of the weaker teams in the conference. Buffalo State and RPI battled it out yesterday, with RPI ultimately winning. It was a back-and-forth scoring game, however. RPI struck first with a 48-yard touchdown by Peter Lombardi, and less than 3 minutes later, Buff State answered with a touchdown of their own. From there, it was truly a test of which defense would crack first. It was ultimately Peter Lombardi who closed the game, just as he'd opened it with a 28-yard reception for a touchdown. Union will have the pressure on them as the eyes of the league look to see if they can keep this unbeaten season alive against a tough defensive team in St. Lawrence. And wrapping up the night, my key game for next week, the Hobart Statesmen take on your Ithaca Bombers. The Bombers currently sit tied with Union unbeaten in both Liberty League play and overall. Hobart will be looking to take an early lead and use defensive pressure to keep wide receiver Will Gladney in check. And for our last game of the day yesterday, it came down between the battle of the undefeateds in Hobart and Union. Union seemed to have no problem with Hobart as they won 23-7. Senior linebacker Evan Gillen gave Union the juice on the defensive end. He had 6 solo tackles and 2 interceptions on the night. The final game of the day was the biggest as the Liberty League title was hanging in the balance. Our own Ithaca Bombers faced off against Union. Union dominated in most facets of the game. The Dutchmen held the ball for 36 minutes total and nearly 12 minutes in just the third quarter alone. And even with Ithaca racking up nearly 500 yards on offense, it was the turnovers that decided their fate. Nick, for majority guys on the field, they're on and off constantly. But you, however, are just expected to come in and perform at a moment's notice. How do you prepare for that on the sidelines?
You just gotta it's all in your head. You just got to prepare. You got to be ready to go on at any second.
Nick, what have you done now as a senior to help lead this defense to be as dangerous as that has been thus far?
You know, we just try and do our 111th and, try and go 1-0 each week and stay focused and just follow our game plan.
Well, how did you work in practice this past week to help to dismantle St. Lawrence's defense so quickly?
I think it's just the way we rep things. Like every day we rep one-on-one routes and stuff like that, and it's shown in the games with all our receiving core.
So you had a season-high 11 tackles last week. What is the focus now going into next week to stop an efficient RPI offense?
Try to do the same thing. Just don't miss tackles. Practice your 111. Try hard each day in practice.
Nick, you're #1 in the nation in field goal percentage, and within that you are one of 3 kickers that remains perfect. What pushed you to become a kicker?
Just in high school, we didn't have a kicker on our high school team, and we never had, and I had always played soccer, and I thought I could probably do that. So I went out, and I was pretty good, and now I'm here.
Into next week you have Hobart. What specifically are you looking to do just to take away something that they have on the offensive side?
We just got to get aligned. They're going to try and beat us with their formation. We got to adjust properly, but same goal each week. We got to shut down the run and then make them pass the ball and then shut down the pass.
Harry, you came up big for your team. Your second start of your career. What was going through your mind during that interception?
Just doing my job, like Mikey said before. We pride ourselves on that. I think that is one thing that has helped me as a player is that.
Well, how do you remain focused this next week in practice against a significantly weaker team in Buffalo State?
I see the opposite. I feel like they have a lot of talent on that team, and we just take it week by week. And I've been preaching to the team, just respect every opponent. It doesn't matter who they are. It could be a modified team, high school. It doesn't matter who we play. Just take it week by week. Respect your opponents and go out there just like we would in a national championship game.
Nick, you haven't kicked a field goal in about 2 weeks. What are you doing to prepare yourself in practice so that you are ready for that at MetLife?
Just keep doing what I've been doing the whole season. I try not to mess up my routine or anything. I still warm up the same. I just try to. I don't really think about when was the last time I kick. I just focus on when's the next time I'll kick.
Nick, you are now currently second in interceptions in the Liberty League. What have the coaches done, and what have you done personally to get yourself there?
It's tough to say. I mean, last year I had 1 interception, but just going in every day, practice, trying to do my best, and working a lot more in pass coverage this year than I did last year. Bronson was more of a pass coverage guy last year.
You have 2 interceptions in just 2 games started. What do you take into practice and use to build off of for your first week of Liberty League matchups?
I think this week of practice is going to be a good week. It needs to be a good week. I mean, because as you can see in the game, we're up 38-7, and we didn't really play our best in the second half because last week's practice was just up and down and up and down.
As a first year, what does it mean to have the opportunity to play in MetLife Stadium, and what adjustments are you going to have to make to adjust to that stadium and the feel of it?
It's definitely crazy. I wasn't expecting that at all, but to adjust to it, I got to go out and I just got to look at it, keep it small. I can't think of all the people watching. I just got to focus on the kick and be locked in like I am for any other game.